there. I'm really excited to start sharing a little bit from inside my studio, sharing what I'm working on this year, sharing what I'm feeling excited about for spring, what I'm feeling excited for, like feeling that energy of like the buds really like pushing through the ground and like reaching up, and wanting to express a bit of that in here, and wanting to share a little bit of how that's happening in my studio, share what I'm making and why I'm making it and what the intention behind these pieces are. Sewing and a lot of textile arts, they have a lot of symbolism, and in the magic of creating them, and in the process, in the slow process, and working with these fibers. And so I really wanted to share that, what the intention behind these pieces are, and what the kind of like the magic behind the making process. My daughter started doing more days at daycare, so now I have more time in my studio, and it's just like, I'm just really excited to get new things started. And I have a tendency to start things and get really excited about them and then leave them unfinished for like sometimes years. And so this is also a way for me to hold myself accountable for actually getting these things done. Because I feel like if I show you something that's half finished and then like I just disappear with it for a while, then that makes me feel bad. And not that I want to make myself feel bad, but I just want to give myself more motivation to get things done. Right now it is actually today the day that I'm recording this is the equinox. That is Ostara on the calendar of the year. And it's just a beautiful time of year where we've got all of these new sprouts coming up in the yard, and I've got all of these new ideas springing forth, and it just feels like such a creative time, and there's so much happening and so much kind of like pushing forward. And I feel I really start to feel the Aries energy of like, come on, let's go, let's make it happen. And I have an Aries moon, so that really gets me going, where I'm like, all right, I can see the peonies coming out of the ground. I can see the rhubarb is starting to unfurl those little purple red leaves. And the chickens are starting to make a mud pit of the backyard. And so just really finding that happening in my studio as well. I have had with my newfound time, I've had a desire to start making clothes a lot more. That's like one of my original passions. I've written 2 books on embroidery, but I really love embroidery in the context of embroidering on clothes. That's how I really sort of started merging the art making process with my clothes making process. I've been making clothes since I was a kid. I love making clothes. And so wanting to make clothes in more of a collection, so that they are not so much standalone. They're kind of talking with each other, and having all the colors speak to each other, and having the concepts behind them all speak together. And my theme for this collection is the theme of fallen empires. And so I started doing some research throughout history of like, we have this tendency to think that as societies that we are like uncrushable, and we continue to get crushed. The most massive societies continue to go to dust over the course of hundreds of years, thousands of years, whatever. Nothing lasts forever. And the natural world reminds us of that all the time. But also looking back into history, we're easily reminded that no leadership is forever. And that is very important, and very, very important, especially right now. So I started doing research on different fallen empires. I was like, oh, what empires have fallen because of corruption? And maybe the populace took over. What empire, just looking at different empires falling. And then I realized, I was like, I actually don't have the time for this. This is a deep dive into historical study that I went a little too far basically into the research element of it. And I was like, I got to remember that I still only have a certain amount of hours each week to make clothes. So the Fallen Empires collection, it basically just got shifted out into what are some of like the most common rulers that we have heard of, the Byzantine Empire, like some of the most powerful empires, and just reminders that like not all of them exist forever. Anyways, all of that to bring us back to some of the pieces that I've been working on. So I have these pants that I made, these silk crepe pants, or I think they're actually a silk georgette pant. And I made a Make It With Me lesson for that, for my soft work course. Loved making these. It's a very simple cut, and these are actually just like, these were a plan for a pair of pants that I was going to make. So that I wanted to do a patchwork pair of pants that I'm calling the Constantinople pant. And it's just sort of like a staggered patchwork that will be done on that. I haven't made those yet. That's on my sewing list. And oh, and for the fabrics for this collection, I'm trying to use some of the fabrics that I already have in my own collection, trying to use what I've already got. But I also, I found that Stone Mountain and Daughter Fabrics is an incredible dead stock collection. And I really, there are some companies I just really enjoy buying new fabric from. For example, Ruby Star Fabrics just have the most gorgeous prints, the most gorgeous yarn dyed cottons. Alexia, Marcelle, Abegg is one of their designers. Incredible work. So I do, I do occasionally indulge in new fabrics. I'm not like totally anti new fabrics, but when I'm planning a collection like this, I just like to think of like, how can I still access some of the fabrics that have already been produced and like maybe just need a new home. So like Fab Scrap is an amazing resource for that. Swanson's Fabric is an amazing resource for that. I just happened to find a few silk crepe colors and a few silk crepe prints that I absolutely loved, and they all sort of merged well together, and they all came from Stone Mountain Daughter. So yeah, I've got my Constantinople pant, and then I've got a few crochet pieces that I'm working on. So this top is still in the process. It's still just in pieces right now, but I will put it together, especially because I put it on this video, so now I have to. But this is the Theodora top. So this is like the Byzantine Empire, Justinian and Theodora. And it was inspired by all of the mosaics of the Byzantine era, which is just incredible, like incredibly impactful art. And so it was just a project on like, how can I make this come through in a crochet project? How can I create like a mosaic with different crochet stitches? And I just freestyle. I usually freestyle my crochet tops. I never use a pattern because I work on just like putting together squares and rectangles, just like I teach in my soft work course. So that is how I make my crochet pieces, and they just eventually, you put them on the body, and the thing about crochet is it will form and fit. Even if you're working with a rectangle, you don't really need to make it that fitted because that crochet will eventually kind of mold to the shape of your body. Another piece that I'm working on is called the Cleopatra collar. And this is going to be a crocheted neckline. I'm going to actually sew this onto a cotton gauze. I have like a poppy colored cotton gauze. It's a little too bright right now. Again, dead stock from Stone Mountain Daughter, so I'm going to over dye that. But yeah, I did a few crochet and fabric mixed pieces, probably like 7 or 8 years ago now at this point, and I really loved the way that the crochet and the fabric mixed together. So I'm going to try and do that with this Cleopatra collar. And then I also have this patchwork dress, and this one I just really wanted to play around with. This patchwork dress that I did as a Make It With Me lesson for my soft work course, I wanted to play around with it in like a mini version. So using the same template, using the same process, but just making it a little smaller and revising some details where I was like some things that I learned from the first time and making it better the second time around, and making it a little bit shorter. Because the first one was, I joked around, I was like, it's like hot air balloon chic. So I wanted to show that this same process could be applied to this dress in a much more, much more slimmed down version. And then the next dress I have that I'm working on is the Dynasty dress. And so it's this incredible embroidered piece of fabric. I think it's a Chinese embroidery just based on some of the detailing. I can't find the rest of the scrap, but it was a scrap of fabric that was just completely falling apart. I found it, I think it was in a giveaway pile at Textile Art Center. So I took this incredible embroidery, and the fabric is just falling apart. And the reason the fabric is falling apart is probably based on the iron content that was put on it. So there's this thing that they would do with silks. When you have a silk fiber and then you have to go through a process called degumming that silk fiber before it gets woven, it takes a lot of the weight of the fiber out. And because most fabrics are sold by yards, that normally wouldn't matter. Silk is sold by weight, or at least at one point it was. Still technically is sold by weight. So what fabric manufacturers would do, they would put metal salts that would make the fabrics weigh more onto the fabrics. Like they would infuse the fabrics with metal salts like iron. And iron, for anybody who works with natural dyes, if you put a lot of iron on a protein fiber, silks and wools are protein fibers, if you put a lot of iron on them, it's going to disintegrate the fibers. So basically what happens is what they call shattering. The silk shatters. And you'll see this in a lot of like Victorian crazy quilts. Well, there will be an element of where you're just seeing the threads in one direction. So either the warp or the weft. The threads in only one direction are found still there, and the rest of the threads have just shattered. So this Chinese silk embroidery completely shattered. But the stitches are still there, and most of the parts around the stitches are intact. And so what I did was I put my walking foot on my sewing machine and I went around each and every part of the embroidery and I stitched it down with the walking foot. And I gave it a rinse to make sure that it could take a little bit of, take a little bit of handling. And I'm pretty sure this is going to make it last a long time. I stitched it down to a linen base and I stitched anywhere where the threads were, the silk fabric in the background was shattered. I stitched it down a bunch so you could really still see the texture of it, but it's totally secure. And then I combined this with, I think this is a chambray that I got from Botanical Colors. And then the blue stripes are a Ruby Star Society fabric. I think it's Alexia, Marcelle, Abegg as well. So yeah, that is the dress that I'm working on now. It's in, it's kind of like in halfway. I just have to figure out how to finish the front neckline. I made some minor adjustments on it. I put pockets in the front, which I love. So yeah, then that one I'm calling the Dynasty dress. Again, with this like idea of like fallen empires, things falling apart and like the magic of that really. So I want to share some of the other things that I'm finishing up right now, or some things that I finished just as like a way of recording my process and a way of recording my own creations, because they just kind of come out of my studio, especially with things that I make for my daughter and she just kind of like takes them on. So I knitted this bobble hat, which I love. It's out of this really beautiful alpaca, and if you look at the fibers closely, there's so many different colors spun into this. And I just wanted to learn how to make baubles, and I love this hat, and it's so super soft and so incredibly warm. I love alpaca fibers. Yeah, many people do not know that I knit and crochet also. I just love textiles. I love the feeling of them. I love the tactile nature of them. And I think it's like such a calming thing for me too, to be able to sit on the couch while my daughter's running around or something and be able to work on something. I can't necessarily embroider. The needles are too much around her and she gets caught up in the threads. Whereas the yarn, it's a little more, I have one piece of yarn coming from and she can play with it if she wants to. But we were evolved as humans to be making things with our hands. And so we do a lot of stuff in the computer. We do a lot of stuff that's kind of like detached from the actual process. That's why sometimes when we sit down to chop a vegetable to make dinner and it's the first time for that day that we've done something like really intentionally with our hands, that we've really made something with our hands, that like this piece can wash over you. Sometimes it can be stressful if you're like running late for dinner. But yeah, we just feel this because we were evolved as a species to be making things with our hands. So my crochet and my knitting practice is like, I don't usually sell a lot of it because it's really time consuming. And I think we've lost a lot of the ideas of how much something should cost. Like a sweater, anybody who knits or crochets knows that if you make a sweater, it could take like up to 40 hours and you try and charge an hourly rate for that and you're like going in the thousands of dollars. 40 hours like minimum, probably more like 80 hours for a sweater. So I do a lot of my sweaters for myself. Crochet is a little bit quicker for me, so I sometimes will sell those. But again, they're still like hundreds of dollars, and I don't necessarily, I'm not saying like every shirt you have should cost you hundreds of dollars because people deserve to be paid for their wages, but like, but we do actually deserve to be paid for our work. So generally I keep them for myself because I know that I will give it a lot of love and attention. So, but I do want to sell some of these crochet pieces and offer them for sale. And the fun thing is, with a lot of the crochet pieces, I usually make them to my size. So if they don't sell, I'm like, oh no, it goes from my studio closet into my personal closet. Some other pieces that I've made recently, I knitted another hat. I was going to knit it for myself. I ended up knitting it too small because I used a pattern for once, and this is why I hate using patterns, because it just doesn't end up working out for me. I'm much better freestyling. So this is a hat that I made for my daughter, and I made a big, huge, puffy pom-pom on the top, and this was just like some leftovers that I had from a sweater that I made for myself. So it's supposed to be like coordinating to the sweater, but now my daughter can coordinate to me while I wear the sweater. And then I also made her this little purse. So one of the jokes that I make about my crochet process is that the hook size directly coordinates with my anxiety. So if I'm working with a big hook, I'm feeling good. I'm feeling loose in my body. If I am working with a tiny hook like this is 3.75 millimeters. This is the smallest I will go. People work smaller. I think I can't. If I'm working with a 3.75 millimeter hook, I am stressed out. So I started this purse, I don't know, a few months ago, maybe sometime around like November 2024-ish. I don't know what was going on there that was really stressing me out, but so I started making my daughter a purse, and it's taken me a very long time because these stitches are very tiny, and it's like just kind of frustrating and angsty for me to work this small, but it is a way of, I don't know, something about these tiny stitches is a way of just like processing emotions and processing my own, my own anger about things, or my own frustration, or my own anxiety about things. So this is my daughter's frustration purse. So yeah. The last piece that I want to share with you, I am going to be actually turning the making process of this. This is a dirndl skirt is what they're called, and it's basically just a big rectangle of fabric that's been gathered. But I put a little like hook and eye closure on the side and a pocket on the side, pocket entry, which is one of my favorite ways of designing clothes. I hate using zippers. I hate making buttons. And buttonhole, I don't hate making buttons. I hate making buttonholes. I don't make buttons ever, but I hate sewing on a button for whatever reason. So this is the pocket closure that I usually use, a pocket entry closer. And I am going to be sharing this as a public Make It With Me lesson so everybody can get a taste of like what those lessons are like and get a taste of my style of teaching and everything. So look forward to that. That will be on my YouTube maybe by the end of the month. And now I want to tie this up, this little vlog. Is that what we're gonna call it? I don't know. That feels like it doesn't roll off the tongue. Vlog. Sorry. So yeah, just like personal journal. I don't know. Sharing. This moment of sharing my seeds of creation. I want to share some ideas that I have for the future. So I'm working on some ideas for like summer dresses and what that looks like. And I have a lot of yardage of fabric where I'll have 2 yards of a cut of fabric and kind of thinking about like, how can I make a summer dress out of that feels really flowy and free. I am the type of person in summer, I'm just like, don't touch me with my clothes. Like I want my clothes to just float away from my body. And so looking at how I can do that in a way that still complements my figure, but doesn't feel restrictive to me. So yeah, looking at some ideas for summer dresses, how I'm going to work with these different cottons I have. I have some beautiful batiks that I want to play with that I've been wanting to get into. Some slightly more stiff cottons, some very drapey cottons, and seeing how different cuts might work for those and playing around with like how to make these cuts zero waste, how to make them based on the rectangles. My favorite 2 things to play with. I also want to work with hand applique. I love the way it looks, and I have a little mini course on hand applique alters if you want to check that out. So I started a couple of jackets last year with applique on the back of them, and so I do want to finish those by the fall, hopefully. But I want to do more applique tops. I did this, one of my favorite shirts that I made last year, who I don't know if I should be saying this, but I sold it to a person named Dawn and it has a sunshine on it. And that just made, I was like, this is amazing. That's like the perfect home for it. But yeah, so wanting to do more applique, wanting to do maybe like more sun appliques on the front of shirts and just playing around. I just love the impact of hand applique, and it is a little bit more peaceful than trying to do machine applique, which I also do. I think I also included that in my applique altered course. So yeah, I also want to play with more ideas for protective embroideries and like embroideries of empowerment and feeling kind of like a fierceness and like a willingness to fight for what we believe in, and having to channel that, trying to channel that into embroideries and like imagery, and how can I put that into stitches, and thinking about what kind of garments I want to put those on. And I was like, I kind of want them to be these really effeminate garments that have these really powerful symbols behind them, the symbols of action, the symbols of creation, and the symbols of power. I think that like this idea of like feminine and masculine, and you know, feminine's more receptive and masculine's more active and more powerful. I'm like, I think that the birthing aspect of the feminine is one of the most powerful acts that anybody can do. And so just putting that, infusing those 2 back together, the power of within feminine shapes and within feminine fabrics, like actually there's a real strong like impact and a capability there that I think right now especially needs to be sort of channeled and emphasized. So yeah, that basically ties up today and this little video journal. I will leave you with a video of my daughter correctly identifying garden plants.
This one, rhubarb.
Rhubarb. Oh, and if there's anything I shared today that you're curious about learning more about, or you want to hear me talk more about, feel free to comment and let me know. I loved doing this, so I would love to share more about my process or my studio or whatever. So yeah, comment and let me know what you want to hear about. Okay.